In 2004, Morgan Spurlock convinced millions that McDonald's could wreck your body in just a month. But 20 years later, his math doesn't add up. He never publicly released the detailed daily food log that would verify his 5,000 calories per day claim, and the science looks shakier than ever. Later experiments challenged his results, and his own admission about long-term alcohol use now raises questions about what really caused the health issues shown on screen. Today, we're looking back at the most famous fast food documentary in history to see how its claims compare with independent research and verifiable data. But first, it helps to understand why McDonald's was such an easy target at that exact cultural moment. How McDonald's became the perfect villain. In the years leading up to 2004, McDonald's had already cemented itself as a symbol of scale, convenience, and abundance. Part of that image came from its most aggressive promotion, the supersize option. First introduced in the late 1980s and made permanent in the early 1990s, the upgrade allowed customers to swap their regular fries and soda for portions nearly double in size, all for just a small extra charge. What began as a limited marketing experiment soon became part of the chain's identity, reinforced through promotions tied to cultural landmarks. One of the most famous examples was the 1993 tie-in with Jurassic Park, which linked the thrill of a summer blockbuster to the thrill of walking away with the biggest soda and fries imaginable. Bigger is better wasn't just a slogan, it had become a kind of cultural shorthand, with supersized entering everyday conversation as a metaphor for American excess. By the early 2000s, this mindset collided with a national conversation about health. Newspapers ran constant stories about rising obesity rates, while talk shows debated whether corporations or consumers carried more responsibility. Nutritionists questioned whether portions that kept expanding created an environment where overeating seemed normal. Critics argued that toys in Happy Meals shaped children's lifelong eating habits, while sociologists worried that entire communities were replacing home-cooked meals with fast food. These arguments weren't always backed by airtight science, but they resonated emotionally. With its global branding and sheer visibility, McDonald's stood out as the most obvious scapegoat. Its golden arches came to represent not just a burger chain, but an entire style of eating, and an entire generation's anxieties about what that meant. That visibility made McDonald's an easy target for parody. Late-night shows joked about gallon-sized sodas, and news outlets loved placing portion sizes side by side to show just how oversized supersize really was. Other fast food chains had been just as aggressive in upselling, but McDonald's received more attention because it was everywhere. Its ubiquity meant that critiques landed harder, and by 2004, the chain was already functioning as a cultural villain in the debate around food and health. Into this atmosphere, Morgan Spurlock's Super Size Me arrived. The documentary wasn't introducing a new controversy. It was dramatizing a fear that many people already shared. Watching a man eat 3 McDonald's meals a day while his health reportedly spiraled downward amplified what audiences were prepared to believe. That fast food, especially from the most recognizable restaurant in the world, was uniquely harmful. The broad irony is that consumption patterns didn't slow down after the film. Even with Super Size Me dominating headlines and classrooms, fast food remained deeply embedded in daily American life. Surveys show that over 115 million Americans still eat fast food every single day, a reminder that the documentary's central villain was never the only source of the problem. Still, McDonald's took the disproportionate brunt of the cultural blame. Spurlock's framing gave viewers the catharsis of seeing a global corporation punished, without requiring them to question the wider food environment that extended far beyond a single chain. This atmosphere of suspicion laid the foundation for Spurlock's claims to be taken at face value. The public didn't just scrutinize his experiment, they accepted it as further confirmation of what they already thought they knew. And that acceptance made his most dramatic claims seem less questionable than they should have been, especially when it came to how much he was actually eating each day. The 5,000 calorie problem. One of the most striking claims in Super Size Me was Morgan Spurlock's insistence that he consumed roughly 5,000 calories every single day during his month-long McDonald's experiment. That number became central to the film's drama, fueling the idea that fast food could devastate a body in record time. But almost immediately, critics noticed that the math didn't seem to fit, and the lack of supporting evidence raised more questions than answer. Unlike a scientific study where food logs are recorded and shared, Spurlock never released detailed records of what he actually ate. Without those logs, the 5,000-calorie figure remained unverified, and replication attempts consistently produced lower numbers. To understand why this claim drew so much scrutiny, it helps to look at what McDonald's actually offered in 2004. A typical meal, a cheeseburger, medium fries, and a medium soda, sat at about 1,000 calories. Even if you upgraded to a Big Mac with supersized fries and a large Coke, the number landed closer to 1,500 to 1,700 calories. That's significant, but it still meant that someone aiming for Spurlock's figure would need to eat those oversized combos 3 times a day, often with desserts or additional drinks on top, to get anywhere close to 5,000. Occasional days may have reached that level, but consistently hitting it across 30 days would require a deliberate effort to stack portions in ways most customers never did. In other words, it wasn't an automatic outcome of simply accepting the supersize option. It would have required intentional excess. Nutritionists who reviewed available menus attempted to reconstruct daily eating patterns. If breakfast had been 2 Egg McMuffins with hash browns and orange juice, that was about 900 calories. Lunch built around a Quarter Pounder with cheese, large fries, and a Coke totaled roughly 1,400. Add in a sundae and you reach about 1,700. Dinner anchored by something like a double Quarter Pounder with cheese, fries, and a shake came close to 1,800. Together, that day edges just below 4,000 calories. That's unquestionably unhealthy when repeated day after day, but it falls well short of the 5,000 figure that dominates the film's narration. It is true that higher totals were possible. Pairing the largest burgers with supersized fries and oversized sodas repeatedly could push totals upward. But even then, the numbers only cracked 5,000 when every single meal represented the absolute heaviest combination available, supplemented with desserts or extra entrees. Viewers noticed that the film often showed him eating filet-o-fish sandwiches, smaller shakes, or salads, meals that would lower those totals. This inconsistency made critics suspect that the headline number was less a measured average than a chosen figure meant to emphasize excess. The credibility gap widened because Spurlock declined to show his food diary. He admitted keeping a written record during the filming process, but chose never to release it publicly. From a scientific or journalistic standpoint, this omission is glaring. If the diary had confirmed his claim, making it available would have been the easiest way to end the debate. Instead, withholding it left only his narration, and that forced audiences to take him at his word. For skeptics, the refusal suggested the diary would have revealed numbers less extreme than advertised, thereby weakening the dramatic story presented on screen. In the years after the film's release, others tried to repeat the experiment. Perhaps the most known was a Swedish university trial, often referred to as the Linköping study, where participants ate fast food daily for a month under medical supervision. The outcomes did show weight gain and higher cholesterol, but they did not replicate the severe spikes in liver values and mood collapse that supersized me asterisk portrayed. Participants averaged between 3,300 and 4,200 calories per day, not the supposedly unstoppable 5,000. Similarly, critics like filmmaker Tom Naughton attempted their own McDonald's-only diets while carefully tracking calories. His project, eventually presented in Fathead Asterisk, also landed far below 5,000 calories a day, and his health markers did not crash in the way Spurlock claimed. These replications shared an important pattern. When calories were tracked transparently, results looked less catastrophic and more consistent with expected overeating rather than proof that McDonald's food carried a unique, toxic effect. This raises an important point for viewers. When Spurlock said 5,000 calories, it sounded like he was casually reflecting his everyday diet for the month. But in practice, sustaining that figure would have required near-constant supersizing, strategic dessert orders, and possibly extra meals not shown on screen. Without visible proof, we cannot know if that is what actually occurred. And if he was eating off-camera or exaggerating totals, Then the experiment shifted from being an open demonstration into a staged performance, designed to shock rather than document. One way to make the issue more concrete is to visualize it. Imagine sitting with a single supersized Big Mac meal, burger, fries, and soda. That sits between 1,500 and 1,700 calories. It's a large, filling order. Now compare that to a hypothetical 5,000 calorie day. That would require 3 of those meals, plus extras like sundaes, shakes, or even second burgers. Stacked together, it looks less like what a normal customer might choose and more like a filming stunt designed to guarantee a health collapse. If this script is being cut for video, it's the perfect place for a quick visual comparison, showing a single large meal contrasted with a full day's worth of food needed to reach 5,000. Viewers can immediately see how strained that claim really is. The absence of a food log remains the crux of the problem. If the diary had proven the claim, it would have strengthened the film's credibility. By withholding it, Spurlock insulated himself from verification while simultaneously capitalizing on the most sensational version of the story. In science, this kind of gap would invalidate the results. In entertainment, it could pass as dramatic framing, but audiences were encouraged to see supersize me asterisk as a serious statement about health. That contradiction is part of the reason critics continue to revisit the calorie claim decades later. Spurlock's story was never just about his meals. It was about building the impression of a body unraveling under predictable daily fast food intake. But if that intake was inflated or selectively presented, then the unraveling loses its explanatory power. The difference between 3,800 and 5,000 calories per day is not just a margin of error. It's the difference between presenting a realistic case of overeating and staging a theatrical collapse. That distinction matters when viewers interpret his health outcomes as warnings about what could happen to them. And those health outcomes were part of what truly unsettled audiences. Between weigh-ins and frequent medical visits, the film showed doctors appearing shocked by his results. His supposed calorie intake made those scenes feel inevitable, almost like watching an experiment reach a preset breaking point. Whether his daily numbers were inflated or not, the medical checkups became the moments that convinced viewers the situation was dire. Those segments carried more weight than any single meal shown on screen, and they are where the film's credibility gets tested next. Editing the doctors. When audiences remember asterisk super, size me asterisk, the images that often stand out the most aren't of Morgan Spurlock eating yet another hamburger. They're of doctors looking alarmed during his checkups. Each appointment in the film seemed more urgent than the last. Nurses were shown exchanging worried looks, and physicians appeared to voice escalating concern, leaving viewers with the impression that his health was deteriorating at an extraordinary pace. The editing leaned hard into this tension with quick cuts and ominous music, amplifying the most unsettling moments while downplaying more neutral observations. The takeaway was unmistakable. Medical professionals were not just monitoring his diet, they were witnessing a health breakdown in real time. But stripped of dramatic presentation, medical evaluations rarely sound like the scenes shown in the movie. Physicians typically walk patients through numbers and possible causes, often pointing out which results call for monitoring rather than immediate panic. The film condensed those explanations into fragments that sounded more extreme than they likely were. A simple "your cholesterol is up, let's keep an eye on this" can shift tone completely when isolated, placed against dark background music, and cut together with Spurlock's visibly depressed reactions. What the audience experienced was less a full medical consultation and more a highlight reel designed to keep the sense of crisis rising from scene to scene. The most memorable of these moments came in the discussion about Spurlock's liver. In the documentary, his doctor is shown comparing his results to what you might expect from someone who abuses alcohol. The implication was clear. Just 30 days of fast food had caused damage that resembled the effects of long-term drinking. This comparison became one of the central talking points of the entire film, so much so that it still circulates in conversations about the dangers of fast food nearly 2 decades later. Yet medical professionals who commented on the documentary noted how unlikely it would be for a single month of dietary excess, no matter how unhealthy, to bring about such severe changes. Liver enzyme levels can fluctuate, but the rate of change Spurlock displayed was far faster and far more dramatic than what is normally observed from diet alone. One doctor quoted after the film's release described the idea as extreme for the timescale, underlining that while food can certainly create risks over time, this kind of rapid damage would need a different explanation. That explanation may have come years later, when Spurlock openly admitted to decades of heavy drinking. His admission made alcohol a plausible, and, in the eyes of many medical experts, the most likely factor behind the abnormalities the film attributed entirely to fast food. While the movie carefully framed his issues as evidence against McDonald's, understanding his hidden habits offers a context the audience never received. Instead of proving that hamburgers had reshaped his liver in weeks, the test results might have been showing patterns consistent with someone who had been drinking heavily for years. This doesn't mean diet played no role at all. Overeating does stress the liver, but it does mean the certainty presented in the film was not supported by the underlying medical science. The editing's role in this cannot be understated. By amplifying the alarm in doctors' voices and omitting caveats or alternative explanations, the filmmakers eliminated nuance in favor of spectacle. Even though liver abnormalities can arise from multiple factors, viral infections, dehydration, and particularly alcohol, the on-screen narrative offered only one cause: McDonald's meals. Viewers trusted the authority of the physicians because they were real people in real appointments. But without hearing the sessions in full, they could not know which parts had been left on the cutting room floor. The resulting impression that medically trained professionals were stunned at food alone destroying his body fit perfectly into the film's argument, but was far from a complete picture of the situation. Other elements of his checkups followed the same selective pattern. Increases in cholesterol and weight were presented as shocking, when in reality both were predictable results of sustained overeating. The dramatic tone implied he was experiencing a biological collapse, when in fact many clinicians remarked that the shifts, while unhealthy, were consistent with consuming more calories than the body needed. Without broader context, viewers conflated ordinary risk markers with catastrophic illness. Again, what was lost was moderation. Doctors often frame test results with advice on next steps, whether that's monitoring levels, improving diet, or retesting to see if a spike is temporary. The film chose the moments that sounded like warnings and edited them as if doctors were announcing emergencies. The effect of using selective edits was not just storytelling, it reshaped how the public interpreted the experiment. For students shown the movie in health classes, or for general audiences who had never reviewed lab work before, it gave the impression that fast food was uniquely capable of destroying a body almost overnight. From a media standpoint, that perspective was compelling. From a scientific standpoint, it was misleading. Even the most critical physicians reviewing the film agreed that overeating fast food was harmful, but they questioned the framing that implied unparalleled danger. When coupled with Spurlock's later revelations about his drinking, the suspicion grew that the film had used editing to conflate different causes under one dramatic label. In hindsight, this choice may explain why Supersize Me feels persuasive in the moment but fragile under scrutiny. Hearing a doctor mention liver damage like an alcoholic, while Spurlock insists he wasn't drinking, created a powerful narrative that grabbed headlines. But once the drinking became public knowledge, it reframed those medical scenes dramatically. What once looked like undeniable proof of fast food's dangers began to look more like storytelling that had left out relevant information. And when critics pointed this out, it changed how seriously the results could be taken as evidence. This is why the portrayal of doctors matters so much to any evaluation of the film. They were the anchors meant to ground the stunts in objective reality. By editing their responses selectively, Spurlock gave audiences what looked like medical certainty, when in reality the data was more ambiguous than the documentary admitted. And because he withheld information that would have helped explain those results, his alcohol use, the audience was left without the context needed to interpret what they were seeing. The broader implication is simple but important. Dramatic editing can make reasonable medical conversations appear catastrophic, and hidden lifestyle context can make ordinary test results look extraordinary. In *Supersize Me*, those two dynamics work together to heighten a story that felt definitive when it played in theaters, but reads far differently with hindsight. The cautionary tale that captured headlines in 2004 now looks less like a clear warning about McDonald's and more like a case study in how selective framing can dominate perception. And that brings us to a logical question. If fast food really could create this level of health collapse in a matter of weeks, surely others trying the same experiment would show the same catastrophic results. Yet, when researchers and independent critics repeated his 30-day plan, their bodies didn't respond in nearly the same way. That discrepancy became one of the strongest challenges to the credibility of Spurlock's story. Replication attempts that didn't stack up. If the health effects Spurlock portrayed truly reflected what anyone would face after a month of fast food, then others repeating that experiment should have reached the same outcomes. The idea was simple: 30 days, 3 meals, no outside food, and acceptance of larger portions when offered. Yet when people tried it in the years that followed, their experiences didn't align with the crisis depicted in the film. Some gained a few pounds, most reported feeling sluggish, but the catastrophic bloodwork and dramatic health breakdowns Spurlock presented were never duplicated. What emerged instead was a patchwork of outcomes, none approaching the severity that made *Supersize Me such a sensation. One of the most important replications came from researchers in Sweden at Linköping University. In 2006, they enrolled 7 healthy medical students who agreed to eat exclusively fast food for 4 weeks. To mirror Spurlock's sedentary lifestyle, they were even provided free bus passes to discourage any extra exercise. Throughout the study, participants checked in with doctors, logged their meals, and had blood drawn to track markers like cholesterol and liver enzyme. The results were far less dramatic than Spurlock's narrative. Yes, the students gained weight, on average about 6 to 12 pounds, and several reported feeling more tired than usual. But their cholesterol rose only modestly, and none suffered the kind of severe liver issues that had been portrayed in the film. The Swedish team noted that there were changes worth monitoring, but they were the kinds of changes expected when healthy young adults suddenly overeat processed foods, not signs of imminent organ damage. For critics of Spurlock's claims, the Swedish study stood out as the clearest scientific signal that his body's reaction was not typical. The contrast between Spurlock's claim of near liver failure and the Swedish group's mild abnormalities raised a lingering question. Why did his health spiral so much faster? Some researchers speculated that his pre-experiment diet may have shaped his response. At the time, Spurlock described himself as living with his vegan girlfriend and keeping a relatively clean diet before switching cold turkey into fast food excess. That shift from plant-based to heavy, greasy, high-calorie foods could have compounded the shock his body experienced. Baseline health plays a measurable role in how people react to dietary stress. Starting from one extreme and swinging to another makes an outcome less representative of what might happen to the average person making similar changes. Outside academic settings, less formal replications also challenged the film's credibility. In 2009, comedian and former health writer Tom Naughton released the documentary *Fathead* as a direct rebuttal. Naughton ate nothing but fast food for a month, carefully tracking his portions and caloric intake. His approach was not eat everything in sight, but rather prove you can manage nutrition even from a fast food counter. The results completely diverged from Spurlock's. Naughton lost weight, reduced his body fat, and saw slight improvements in cholesterol. His experiment demonstrated a basic but crucial point: calories matter more than the restaurant logo on the bag. Without letting portions spiral upward, eating from fast food menus did not automatically trigger collapse. Another example came from John Cisna, an Iowa science teacher who gained media attention in 2014 for his own 30-day McDonald's-only diet. With the help of his students, Cisna designed his meals to stay near 2,000 calories per day, modeling the government's nutritional guidelines. He exercised moderately and tracked his health throughout. At the end, Cisna reported losing about 37 pounds over several months, with lowered cholesterol and improved blood pressure. Though critics pointed out that he deliberately controlled portions in ways Spurlock did not, his experiment underscored how dramatically outcome depends on calorie balance rather than brand-specific toxicity. Cisna's story entered the public conversation less as a definitive counterpoint than as an example of how nutrition choices within the same restaurant chain could produce opposite results. Taken together, these cases illustrate a broader truth. Replication attempts failed to reproduce the dramatic collapse shown on film. They didn't prove fast food was healthy, But they did show that a month of exclusive McDonald's eating did not automatically push people into depression, extreme cholesterol spikes, or liver damage. The weight gain and fatigue participants reported fit the expected pattern of overconsumption, but the more frightening results Spurlock emphasized, shakes, mood crashes, and organ stress, remained unique to his account. That gap made clear that something about his personal context, not the McDonald's menu alone, likely drove the story. Even so, audiences should be cautious not to swing to another extreme. These replications don't suggest that a fast food diet is harmless. Overeating fries and burgers day after day still increases risks for weight gain, high sodium exposure, and long-term metabolic issues. What they highlight is that Spurlock exaggerated the short-term consequences for dramatic effect. Instead of 30 days proving catastrophic by default, what the evidence shows is a range of reactions. Mild strain for some, modest improvements for others under calorie control, and nothing consistently resembling medical collapse. It's also essential to understand how personal history shapes reaction to diet changes. Someone with a background of lower calorie intake or specific health conditions might experience sharper effects from overeating in a sudden shift.